welcome Viju. Viju is an eminent journalist, and he has a book called Flood and Fury. In case you haven't read, please read this book. This is about disasters in the Western Ghats, and it was written after the 2018 floods. Um, I learned a lot from this book. So, just to introduce ourselves, my name is Kavita Upadhyay. I'm a journalist. I write about everything that is going wrong ecologically in the Himalayan region, in terms of policy making, disasters, environment, all of those. Viju, if you could please introduce us with your work.
Hello. Namaste, Namaste, Kozhikode. Kavita, welcome to God's own country. I don't know whether we should call it God's own country. Should call it God's abandoned country, maybe. That's the state of affairs. Anyway, Hortus. Do you know what is Hortus? What is Hortus? It's so much part of what we are going to talk. Hortus is basically a book which is called the Hortus Malabaricus. It's a very scholarly work written some 200 years back by this Dutch governor. His name is Hendrik van Veen. And he compiled the book. But then very interesting thing is that there were three people who he used the assistants. He used three people to the locals to write the book. Two were Gauda Saraswati Brahmins, and one was this legendary physician called Itichan, legendary Irava physician. And in fact, the book is almost like 12 volumes, 500 pages. So it's a classic work, and I would say that's the first book which speaks about the flora of Western Ghats. Around 900 pages of beautiful representation of plants. Of course, it was an imperial mission. The Dutch wanted to take whatever folklore, whatever wisdom was there in the Western Ghats, the medicinal properties of these plants. They wanted to basically take it back to the West. Probably they must have used it in their allopathic medicines. I don't know. You know the famous story of nutmeg curse written by Amitav Ghosh, where the Dutch actually destroyed the Bandanese Island and took nutmeg from there, isn't it? So that way, but then the Itichan is a very interesting character. They took Itichan back to Netherlands. Imagine, I would say Itichan was the first villager who went from Western Ghats to Netherlands, and he was made to sit in a particular place, and he was just, it's called Vamori. In those days, you just talk, and he was such rich, it's a treasure trove of medicine and folklore wisdom, and everything is mentioned in this book. So probably it's coincidental that we are talking about the Western Ghats. And you said I'm Viju B. I write about environment. I've been writing about environment for the last 20 years. I was working in Bombay, Times of India Bombay, and now I'm working as a deputy resident editor in Times of India Kochi. I'll talk about the book much later. The book is called Flood and Fury. And it's just not about floods. It's about the ecological devastation which is happening in the Western Ghats. Yeah, thanks.
So, I would like to start the session with kind of just telling you all as to how we even got to, like, how we started writing about environment and floods and disasters in the first place. So, I'll just start with my experience. I actually was studying journalism in 2013 in Chennai, and I was hired by the Hindu, and I was posted in Uttarakhand. That was my first hiring. That was my first job. Within 1 week of joining the Hindu in Dehradun, the Kedarnath disaster had happened of June 2013. Basically, more than 20,000 people had died because a glacial lake had breached. And there were heavy rainfall, a lot of rivers in the state, all the rivers in the state were flooded. The region had never seen a disaster like that before. And I remember that I had no idea as to what this was, because when I was in college, we weren't really taught about climate change. It wasn't a thing back then. And I remember when we were writing reports, news reports about the devastation, the deaths, the rescue operations, the term climate change didn't figure in anybody's reports. No TV channel, no news reports had the term climate change. This is back in 2013. And I remember just traveling to the hilly areas where disaster had happened. 4 hours from Dehradun, I go to this place called Srinagar. Uttarakhand also has a Srinagar, which is not the Kashmir Srinagar. And I just see a place which has muck and sediments up till maybe 15 feet. The entire town was just filled with sediments up till 15 feet. You couldn't see the first floors of people's houses. And then I traveled further and I saw one hydropower project, and a little further and another hydropower project. And the series of hydropower projects didn't end up till the very end, like till the road, till the place that the road could take us to, there were hydropower projects. And I knew I need to follow this even beyond this disaster. And it so happened that after, like the first few days where everybody is very enthusiastic about covering disasters, you have international agencies, people from New Delhi, newspapers, TV channels just flocking the area, just covering everything about disasters, and they disappear after 10 days. I think what I did was I just continued writing about disasters. I continued revisiting those places every 3 months, every 6 months, once a year for several years to just unravel, to understand different aspects of disasters. And does anything change on the ground after disasters have happened? Does policy making change? Anything changes or not? What are the psychological impacts of disasters? I just kept doing it for so long that it just became my life. So here I am talking about disasters, which just seem to be our future in the Himalayas. Sorry for that very pessimistic comment, but yeah. Viju, if you could just tell us how you even got into just writing about environment and disasters.
Yeah, the book, I'll talk about the book. The book was written in the backdrop of the floods, the Western Ghats. We had 2018, we had floods. I have been writing about environment for the last, as I said, I have been writing about environment for the last 2 decades. But Kerala floods, I would always say that Kerala, post-Kerala floods, we have Kerala, pre-Kerala floods and post-Kerala floods. I mean, Kerala floods actually was a huge eye-opener. As part of reporting, as Kavita was saying, even I went to a few places in Kerala, and I realized there were some other reason for the floods to happen. The obvious reason we were given by the government was unprecedented rains. We had heavy amount of rainfall. It's an obvious reason. Anyone can say if there is rain, there will be floods. But as I traveled, as I started talking to communities, as I started talking to experts, I realized there is something more which is plaguing in the Western Ghats. That's when I started probing, and I gave a book proposal to Penguin, and thankfully they expected it. And then I traveled from one end of Western Ghats. Western Ghats, I'll give a small backdrop of what is Western Ghats. Now, Western Ghats is this ecosystem which is 1,600 kilometer long mountain ranges. And unfortunately, Western Ghats doesn't come under the consciousness of Keralites. That's to begin with. I need to say that it's a very sad thing. I mean, how many of us actually talk about, even for me also, even for the 6 states that we are talking about, for Karnataka, for Maharashtra, for Goa. If you ask them where is Western Ghats and what is the eco service that the Western Ghats gives, hardly people talk about. So the Western Ghats is this 1,600 kilometer long mountain ranges. There are 58 rivers flowing down from the Western Ghat region, and every city, you won't believe it, every city on the western coast, which is like Bombay, Bangalore, Goa, all your big cities in Kerala, Kochi, Kozhikode, Chennai, all your big cities get water from the Western Ghats, from the mountains, from the rivers that flows down from the Western Ghats. Western Ghats is an integral part. I mean, 1/4 of the population on the western coast, on the western side of India, would die of starvation and thirst if there is no Western Ghats. Similarly, like Himalayas. So Western Ghats is never a part of our consciousness. Only when there is a disaster happening, like say for Wayanad or Kerala floods, we talk about Western Ghats. And the Western Ghats, the mountains have all become hostile. That's what they say. See, the rivers are, in Malayalam, there is, media, being part of the media, they say, Pora Raudra Bhavatil Vannu. I mean, mountains have become hostile. You have become hostile to mountains, isn't it? Yeah. Mountains had never become hostile. So this Western Ghat ecosystem, we don't know the civilization began in Western Ghats, in this part of the country. I mean, in my book, I mentioned all your seers, for example, Srinarayana Guru, Adi Shankara, for example, Tukaram, Sai Baba, all of them went up in the mountains, meditated and found enlightenment. Culture began in the Western Ghat region. For example, River Valley civilization, Pamba River Valley civilization, your Kaveri River Valley civilization, Krishna. I mean, the second longest river after Ganga, the Godavari River, starts from Trigambeshwar in the Western Ghats and flows down to the Bay of Bengal. Nobody knows about that. I mean, such a beautiful river. But unfortunately, these ecosystem services, we completely ignored these ecosystem services. I'll give you one data. Before that, I'll give you a very recent data which will actually shock you also. This data was published by the Ministry of Earth Sciences in 2022. This is about landslides. They took a data, the number of landslides which occurred across India. You won't believe it. The Western Ghat region has 2.5 times more number of landslides which had occurred more than in the Himalayan. In the Himalayan. The Western Ghat region had 2.5 times more landslides than the Himalayan region. So, for example, this is between 2015 to 2022, 7-year period. There was around 3,570 landslides which happened, total number of landslides. Out of that, 2,700 landslides happened in Western Ghats. Only 1,072 landslides happened in Himalayan region. And shockingly, 2,229 landslides, that is 60% of the total number of landslides happened in Kerala. This is before Wayanad. Between 2015 to 2022, we had 2,229. This our reporter was there, Times of India reporter Ashwin had broken that story. I mean, isn't it shocking? So the entire landscape of Western Ghats is completely changed. And this is about Ghats. Now, if you talk about the Western coast, for example, you have your Arabian Sea. We are sitting right to the Arabian Sea. Arabian Sea is no longer the sedate Arabian Sea that you're seeing. In Arabian Sea, there has been an 80% increase in cyclonic formations vis-a-vis the Bay of Bengal. In the last 5 years, there have been 7 cyclones in the last 5 years. Imagine. So that's the reason that we are getting erratic rainfalls. That's the reason we are getting cloudburst. 2005 Mumbai floods. I covered 2005 Mumbai floods. 900 millimeters of rainfall in a span of 24 hours. Classic case of cloudburst. Nobody bothered that time. They thought it's again a 1 in 100-year phenomenon. They just forgot. So Western coast and Western Ghats, the character has completely changed. Unfortunately, we are not addressing it. It's very sad. So that is the reason I thought probably I should address that. That is the reason that I wrote the book. So 2019, post-2018 floods, I decided to travel from, as I said, from Kerala to Maharashtra. And I spoke to communities and I found out that the ecological devastation which has happened in the Western Ghat region is the primary reason for the natural disasters to occur. I'll give you a simple example. There's a river called Cherutoni River. I don't know how many of you have gone to Idiki. Cherutoni River was dammed for a hydel project, again like Himalayas. It was dammed to construct the Idiki Dam. So Cherutoni River disappeared. There is no Cherutoni River today. If you go to Idiki, there is no Cherutoni River. There is a huge hydel project, Asia's largest hydel dam, Idiki Dam, and we need power. Nobody is against power. So what happened? Last 22 years, there is no Cherutoni River. You go to the Cherutoni, there is no Cherutoni River. So on the riverbed of Cherutoni River came a township. Imagine. You had football grounds, you had hospitals, you had shopping complexes. And one fine day, on August 16th, 2018, the cloudburst happened in Idiki. They had to open the shutters of Cherutoni Dam. One after, it was a celebration. People started taking selfies. I mean, beautiful. After 26 years, you're seeing water flowing, cascading down as waterfall. And what happened was chaos. That's the beginning of the Kerala floods. Cherutoni town was completely washed away because on the riverbed you are having township. On the riverbed you are having bus stand. This happened across all rivers of Kerala. If you look at Kerala floods didn't happen in Ernakulam because we don't have rivers in Ernakulam. Wherever there was a river, there was flooding. Be it Bharatapuzha, be it Periyar, be it Pamba. We'll talk about Pamba in detail. So ecological devastation of the Western Ghats, I mean river is part of Western Ghats, is the primary reason for the floods to happen. That is my fundamental finding of the book. Yeah.
So thank you for that very, very good explanation of what the Western Ghats are and how they serve us ecologically and how we should be serving them to stay alive, to say the least. So I wanted to talk about this thing, that what's happening in the Himalayan region is that every time a disaster hits, every time you have heavy rains, there's going to be devastation on the ground, right? And what happens is that the government, what it's doing is it's pushing for a lot of infrastructure projects across the Himalaya. Now, when I talk about the Himalaya, I talk about Ladakh, I talk about Kashmir, I talk about Himachal, Uttarakhand, Northeast, I talk about Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tibet, all the same. They're all Himalayan regions, like parts of them. So what's happening is that, especially in India and Nepal, the governments are pushing for a lot of infrastructure projects. So you have a lot of road projects, you have a lot of hydro projects, you have a lot of tourism related projects like hotels, homestays. A lot of that is happening. So every time, because now because of climate change, we also have heavy rains, and heavy rains cause landslides and floods. And we have global warming, which is causing our glaciers to melt, which is also adding to the volume of water in rivers. The governments, what they've started doing is, instead of focusing on policy change, instead of changing something on paper and changing the way they view development, what they've started doing is they're blaming the hills, they're blaming the Himalaya for the disasters. They say that, oh, it's the Himalayan terrain which is vulnerable and fragile. How can a terrain be vulnerable and fragile? It's a terrain. That is its nature. It is complex. You have to understand the Himalayan terrain. You have to understand the nature of the terrain and then delve into it. The terrain is not like a baby that you can, like make into a young person, and, you can't do anything with the terrain. You have to live with it. You have to understand it, and you have to behave with it in a way that the terrain survives and you survive. So the Himalayan terrain is such that the rock type differs. You have weaker rocks that can get sheared easily. You have hard rock, all types of rocks. So when you build through the Himalaya, you can't just cut through them, because when you just cut through the hills to form roads, the next rains can cause landslides, because the hill can come down with the rains if you haven't cut it scientifically. But that's exactly what's happening. You're cutting through the hills unscientifically, without knowing the kind of mountain system, the kind of rock type that you're dealing with. So I want to give this example of this tunnel that collapsed in Uttarakhand last year. I don't know how many of you saw the news. There's this place called Uttarkashi where a tunnel was under construction, a road tunnel. And it was a 4.5 kilometer long tunnel, and a patch of it kind of collapsed last November. It's been a year since it happened. And 41 workers got trapped in it. And then you had all kinds of machinery, auger machines, this, that, workers, scientists from everywhere across the world, geological engineers called upon to just get those workers out alive of that tunnel. Then, after they were brought out, after 17 days, everybody clapped and went home. What you didn't see in journalism, what journalists didn't do, is they didn't see what this project was a part of, who was the company building it, what went wrong. So basically, this 4.5 kilometer long tunnel was part of a 825 kilometer long roads project. It's called the Char Dham project. You basically, the government wanted to make the roads wider for people to travel to the shrines of Kedarnath, Badrinath, because Uttarakhand is a holy place. So the government wanted more and more vehicles to fit into those roads. So they were expanding the roads without thinking much. And this tunnel was part of that road system. Now, we had Prime Minister, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a few years ago. He was there for an election campaign in Dehradun, which is the capital of Uttarakhand. And he had announced that we are dedicating this project, Char Dham Pariyojana, 825 kilometers, to the people who died in the 2013 floods. Okay. Most deaths after this road construction projects have started, most deaths have happened because of landslides in this road expansion project. Okay. And so what happened is that he announced it as the Char Dham Pariyojana. If you just put Char Dham Pariyojana, there is nothing called Char Dham Pariyojana on the internet. So what is this 25-kilometer long project. So what they did was, they divided that 825-kilometer long project into 53 small projects, because they wanted to ensure that every patch that they were widening, every patch of road that they were widening should fall under 100 kilometers. Because otherwise you have to follow EIA norms, environmental impact assessment norms. To escape the environmental impact assessment, they made this large project into smaller patches of 53 projects. So on paper, you don't even have a Char Dham Pariyojana. It's 53 projects. So the people are just being fooled. Basically, there was no environmental impact assessment done for such a huge project. More than 600 kilometers of these roads lead to the border, to Nepal and China border. And there was no environmental impact assessment done. And this tunnel was part of this project. The company that was building this tunnel, it's a Hyderabad-based company called Navayuga, is also building tunnels for another railway project in Uttarakhand. And nothing, no repercussions for that company. The people who, this railway project that I'm talking about, it's a 125-kilometer long railway project in Uttarakhand, and more than 100 kilometers of it is tunnels. And the people, there are several people in several villages that I visited whose houses were damaged because of the blasting happening because of these tunnels. They were not even compensated for that. So basically, we have road expansion for tourists. We are building tunnels for railways for tourists. We have homestays and hotels for tourists. So where will we go? And when disaster happens, then we have to bear the brunt as people who live in the Himalaya. And this is happening across all Himalayan regions, not just Uttarakhand. So this is our story. So I wanted to ask you, Viju, like in your book, you talk a lot about spiritualism in connection with tribal culture and ecology. You talk a lot about culture. So
it's such a
as we can see that in the Himalaya and the Western Ghats, there's so much commercialization happening that, you mentioned in your book that somewhere the spirits have left the forests. So do you want to talk about it, the cultural aspect of ecology?
You need to define culture first. I mean, there's a writer called Fukuoka, farmer, who's known as the father of organic revolution. He said, culture, the best form of culture is agriculture. I mean, such a nice line. Unfortunately, Kerala doesn't have agriculture these days. We all bring our vegetables and fruits from Tamil Nadu. Anyway, as you said, even Kerala has the same problem. In the name of spirituality, in the name of religious institutions. I'll give you a simple example, which I mentioned in my book, Sabrimala. Sabrimala temple, this is not my view. The central post-Kerala 2018 floods, there was a central empowered committee appointed by the Supreme Court, and they went to Sabrimala, and they went to Pamba, for example. Pamba, because Pamba again retrieved, Pamba, I would say, went back to its original path and took off all the encroachments on both sides of the river banks. I mean, it's a good thing. All your Ramamurthy Mandapam, all those things were taken away. It's a good thing that Pamba did. Anyway, the Central Empowered Committee visited Sabrimala, and they gave a very damning report, which is again related to spirituality. For example, Ayyappa, Lord Ayyappa is known as Kanana Vasan. Kanana Vasan is Lord of Forest. Imagine. And the Central Empowered Committee said Sabrimala has turned to be a concrete jungle. I mean, it's a complete concrete jungle. If you go to Sabrimala, I remember going to Sabrimala during my younger days. All of us have gone to Sabrimala. You could swim in the Pamba. Today you can't step into Pamba during the peak season. I had gone there and I had met a person called Radha. I mentioned that in my book. He's not a Mundu scavenger. What he does is he still does it. He goes there. He stands in the water, Pamba. I mean, the pilgrims will come in lakhs and lakhs during the peak season, especially in December. This will happen again. He stands. There are 3-4 people who stands in the water, and it's a very funny ritual that especially non-Keralites. Keralites are very smart. They won't take a bath now. They know that water is very bad. Poor Tamilians and people from Andhra, they're so faithful. I mean, I'm not insulting their faith. It's a good thing. Anyway, they come down. Once you climb the trek, once you have this trek, go up and go to the Sannidhanam, have a darshan and come back. You come back and they remove their mundu, which is a dhoti. They remove their mala. All those things they remove and they put it in the water. I mean, such a weird ritual. And apparently someone told them, it's against dogma, that if you do that, you are reborn again as an Ayyappa. Anyway, this guy, this Radha Mundu scavenger, stands there and he collects. And he collects on an average every day some 5,000 Mundu. And the Travancore Devasam board, instead of stopping this thing, this weird ritual which is destroying Pamba, what they are doing is they have taken a tender for this. And they're making money. The last contractor made around 17 lakh. Imagine. Devasam board is very happy. Who is bothered? And the poor Radha, he's a Mundu scavenger and he stands in that drain. It's not a river. He showed his fingers, a toe. It's all filled with skin diseases. I mean, he's coming from Tamil Nadu. Poor he's a manual scavenger. And imagine that is the kind of spirituality that you are talking about. I mean, the water in Pamba, again like Ganga. Pamba is, by the way, known as the Ganga of the East, Punya Nadi, it's called. And we have, again, I mentioned that in my book, we have our father of Malayalam literature, Tunja Tezhuthachan. He's known as the father of Malayalam literature, and he has said in his book, Pamba is one of the most beautiful river banks that he has ever seen. I mean, he has mentioned, he said, told on Pamba. Anyway, Pamba has medicinal value. I mean, you have your Mrida Sanjeevani, which is what Hanuman came and took when Rama was. I mean, that's a story. That's a myth that you have. Mrida Sanjeevani is there in Pamba, apparently on Shabri Hills. Anyway, the water of Pamba was tested by the department, by the food safety department, and they found that biological oxygen demand is what the purity of water is at. Biological oxygen demand of a normal drinking water should be below 20 mg per gram. In Pamba, it's 220 mg. You can't touch that water. You can't touch it. It's so bad. All the sewage that is there, I mean, lakhs of devotees, it's just coming into this river. And the sad part is, it's not just the river that is getting polluted. That's a whole thing. The Western Ghats, when you talk about Western Ghats, again about Himalayas, again about any ecosystem, I would say, it's not just one part which is getting polluted. The whole thing comes down. It passes through townships like Changanur, like Kottayam. I mean, Pamba comes and finally drains into the Vembanad Lake in Kuttanad. The entire polluted toxic, the entire thing comes to Kuttanad. Kuttanad is again like our own Sundarbans. It's one of the largest lakes, second largest lake in India. So beautiful. Alappuzha is known as the Venice of the East. And Vembanad Lake has become a toxic pit today. So that's why you'll say, what is the problem here? It's a toxic pit. Well, I don't care. I am here. But the shocking part is, that is where our farming is happening. That is the rice that we are eating. I mean, from Kuttanad is known as the rice bowl of Kerala. And we are eating that. If you go to Upper Kuttanad, which I have visited so many times, there are so many cancer cases there. All the farmers have got cancer because there is no water there. They're drinking that water. Imagine there is water all around in Kuttanad. There is not a single drop to drink. You can't have a water harvesting solution in Kuttanad. I mean, come on here. You can't give. I mean, you have spent the Swaminathan Commission, which is M.S. Swaminathan Commission in 2002. Came out this Kuttanad rehabilitation package, 10,000 crore, 12,000 crore rehabilitation package. All they could do was to put some slabs. Kuttanad still remains a toxic pit. So what I'm trying to say is, the river is not a single entity. The mountain is not a single entity. It's an ecosystem. And if you just say, "Arey, that's just happening there," it's not like that. If you're polluting somewhere, it will come back to us in this way. So this is spirituality for us. This is, I mean, very sad. Ganga is also same case, isn't it? And I can go on. Yeah, that is one thing that I mean, this is a perverted version of spirituality, I would say.
So just taking from where you started talking about rivers, we have the Ganga that originates in Uttarakhand, and that is one of the it is the holiest river that the Hindus would consider, and it actually it it allows life to happen for more than 600 million people, right? And obviously it is dirty. Like, you have untreated sewage that is being released. You have all kinds of dams are being built. You have chemicals being released in the water. Everything happening. It's not in Haridwar. The river is not of bathing quality. You can't bathe in it, but people do for their faith, whatever they believe in, right? So what happened? The government didn't come up with any solution. The court came up with a solution. The Uttarakhand High Court. In 2017, the Uttarakhand High Court said that we will now call the Ganga and Yamuna living entities. They said Ganga and Yamuna now are human beings, and they will have all the rights and responsibilities of a human being. Nobody understood what it meant. What is the meaning of this? What do you do with this? The court basically said that there'll be a guardian of the river, which will be the chief secretary of Uttarakhand, and that chief secretary will ensure that the river is clean, that the interests of the river are not sidelined. It's a questionable thing because the river passes through several states. And then how can the Uttarakhand chief secretary question the center or Uttar Pradesh or any state for that matter in how they are handling the part of the river, right? This is one part of it. The other is that ruling never mentioned infrastructure projects, dams, etc., being built in the river. No, that was not mentioned. Third, that ruling, it did not mention that the river can also get sued by people now because it's a human being. Like, I can sue you, you can sue me. If you're saying this river is a human being, you can take the river to court. And the ruling did not even think about it. So now you had the chief justice who had given this ruling was transferred out. So the Uttarakhand government went to the Supreme Court to get a stay, saying that, listen, if we have floods now and again, if somebody dies and they sue us, we'll have to be liable. Like, we have to pay them. That'll be a huge cost for us to pay. So they asked for a stay and they got a stay. So basically, we had this very tokenistic thing called rights of rivers, calling a river a human being, which looks very revolutionary if you read it in papers. That, oh my God, now rivers. In spiritualism, the Ganga is a goddess. If you couldn't treat her with respect then, how will you treat her with respect now that you've called it a human being? You've brought it down to calling it a human being, and then you're definitely not going to treat it equally, right? So that's the situation with these rivers. So one thing that I wanted to discuss was that, there's climate change. We have heavy rainfalls everywhere. I already mentioned glaciers are melting and everything. We have disasters. Now, this has made it very easy for politicians and bureaucrats and the administration to blame everything on disasters. I wanted to bring this example of Sikkim. So last October, there was this huge floods happened in Sikkim. There was a glacier lake that breached. What is the meaning of this is that when glaciers melt, they leave this pool of water at some side of them. So mostly at the mouth of the glacier. And from this pool of water, you have rivers originating. So there's a lake called South Lonak Lake, which is basically the lake in front of the South Lonak Glacier. So the glacier recedes and you have water in it. Now with climate change and global warming, the sizes of these lakes are increasing because the glaciers are melting very fast. So South Lonak Lake is one of the largest glaciers in Sikkim, and it is also melting really fast, right? So you have this lake which is increasing by size a lot. All this is documented, even by government organizations, by independent scientists. Everybody has documented this. And everybody had documented that a disaster will happen. This lake will breach because it won't be able to, the system there, the ecosystem there will not be able to sustain a very heavy lake. It will breach very soon. And that happened last October. Just a few kilometers down the lake, you have Teesta Dam, Teesta 3. Then you have another Teesta Dam, then another Teesta Dam. So you had at least 3 dams that were damaged. Several people died. So even now, the government said that it was a glacier lake. it was a natural disaster, it was meant to be breached, but you had evidence on paper. How can you now blame climate for it? You could have prepared for it, you could have drained it properly, you could have drained it regularly, you should have had early warning systems. Nothing of that sort had happened. And this is the situation with every Himalayan state. You don't have early warning systems. Workers in the dams die when floods come. So this is what it is. And the government still keeps blaming climate change. They don't see any problem with how they are looking at developmental projects in the geography. So that's very questionable, I think. So I just wanted to ask you, like, despite all this evidence that we have that, like, there are disasters, why aren't people angry enough? Why is there no mobilization on ground? Why is there no action from the people's side if the government isn't doing anything? What do you think is happening?
It's a good question. I don't know. I am not. Kerala is one of the most literate states in the country. I feel we have zero environmental awareness to begin with. As I was saying, Western Ghats. I mean, forget Western Ghats. You ask about a neighborhood river, people don't know what is their eco service that the river gives you. There are two things which have just happened in Kerala. I'll be very specific to Kerala and across. I think it's happening. Kerala being a very progressive state, I think that is one thing. We are getting bountiful of rains for the last. I mean, we get so much of rainfall, we take everything for granted. Now suddenly things are changing. Now we are realizing that, again I was saying, now we are realizing that mountains have turned hostile, isn't it? We had no compunction. I mean, I'll give you Wayanad as an example. Wayanad is, we'll talk about Wayanad in detail because I've traveled extensively in Wayanad. I know exactly what happened in Wayanad. We care two hoots about environment, I'll tell you. You look at Tamil Nadu, it has gone far ahead in terms of environmental conservation. That is because we are taking everything for granted. If you look at the destruction of Western Ghats, in the last 90 years, 35% of the Western Ghats have been completely destroyed, which is around 35,000 square kilometers in the last 90 years, which is huge, I would say, which is as big as the state of Kerala has been completely destroyed. Yet you don't realize it. You only realize it when these disasters are beginning to happen. But I think it's too late. And the community initiatives, two things are there. I mean, I don't say that we didn't have any community initiative during the floods. Post floods, we are very good. When there is a flood happening, when the disaster is happening, people come together. They forget their religion, they forget their caste, and they help out each other. After that, it's again extremely selfish, I would say, extremely selfish. In Wayanad, for example, you are not supposed to, if I say this is very controversial, you are not supposed to have houses there in the first place. It's an ecologically sensitive zone. Mepadi Panchayat, if you look at the map, which I have it with me, Hume's Research Center has come out with this map, is ecologically sensitive. It's high hazard ecologically sensitive zone. Mepadi Panchayat cannot have resorts and houses in the first place. Who gave permission? Last year, they gave permission for 400 houses. Last year, imagine. That is an area where you can't have construction. You can't have, again, homestays. I mean, you can't blame the poor people over there. You had warnings. In 1984, you had a landslide in Churalmela. In 2020, you had a landslide in Churalmela. These are warnings. You had the landslide in Puthumala. I mean, these were clear-cut warnings. In 2021, the Disaster Management Authority gave a letter saying that 4,000 people from Mepadi should be immediately rehabilitated. 4,000 people. Almost entire Mepadi is landslide prone. But community, I think that's again, I wouldn't say arrogance, that is stupidity of people not to believe in the scientific evidences that is being put forth. In fact, the day before the landslide occurred, Hume's Research Center, my good friend Vishnunath and her team Suma, they went there and they said that, see, Vishnunath and Suma, Hume's Research Center, what they do is they take measurements of rainfall from local farmers, including Mepadi, and it's being written. I mean, he's doing such a marvelous job. they take rainfall measurements from across farmers. Mepadi, they found out that there is a big rain which is going to come. People need to be rehabilitated from there. And they went there. Vishnu and his volunteers went there. And on a rickshaw, in the noon, they went around Mepadi Panchayat, they went around Churalmala, and they said, please move out. There is going to be a landslide. Imagine, they said that and none of them moved. None of them moved. Isn't that plain stupidity? They informed the local administration. Imagine, it is criminal, I would say. This 400 people would not have died. Isn't it criminal? I think the government should be sued. Local administration didn't bother. And people, of course, I mean, the problem is local administration. I spoke to the local administration chap. He's saying that the problem is, suppose it didn't happen. Array? Look at Orissa, for example, how they dealt with cyclone. How they're dealing with cyclone. I mean, they're not as literate as Keralites. I mean, so many cyclones, they just say, come on, move. And they're moving. Lakhs and lakhs of people are just moving out. We are very arrogant. Keralites are very arrogant. We think nothing will happen here. Nothing will happen. We have our palatial homes on the riverbanks. Nothing will happen. But things are moving very fast. I am saying again, big landslides are going to come up. Not in highlands, but in midlands of Kerala. In Kottayam, in Malappuram, in Pathanamthitta. You mark my words. There are big landslides going to come up. And there will be more deaths. It's a very grim scenario that Kerala is going through. But unfortunately, as you said, there is no community initiative. Government, the less said, the better. The current government is, I would say, hopeless. Not that the previous government was good. Even the government at the center is hopeless. None of them are interested in environmental issues. None of them are interested in people's issues. I mean, the problem is as environmental writers and environmentalists, when we talk about environment, they think that we are elitist. But the fact is, you are talking about environment today, it's not elitism. You are talking about saving and protecting environment to protect your life, man. Your human life. I mean, it should be ulta now. Isn't it? Protecting environment is protecting human life. Earlier, it was not like that. What is the use of protecting that forest? What is the use of protecting that mountain? I mean, if you don't protect it, the whole thing is going to come down. But unfortunately, Kerala lost it out, I would say. Kerala, which had the literacy movement. I mean, beautiful movement. We had the literacy campaign. Why don't you think of an environmental campaign? There are many reasons for that, Kavita. One is the vested interest. Vested interest in, by the quarry owners. I mean, there are a lot of vested interests by the tourist. I mean, the whole. Again, I will get back to this whole thing. The world is changing so fast. Look at Spain, for example. Imagine Spain got flooded. 2,000 people are missing. But they're changing so fast. They have realized that climate change is happening across the world, and they're looking at measures. I mean, Venice, for example, Venice is going underwater. Kerala is on the edge, I would say, because you have Western Ghats on. We have a small stretch of land, isn't it? You have Western Ghats and such a beautiful, diverse land. You have coast. We have 10. I would say half of Kerala is Western Ghats. 48% is highlands. And 40% is highlands, sorry. And almost 48% is midlands. Only 10% is coastal area. Yeah. So that is the first thing, that any developmental project that is going to happen in the Western Ghats, any developmental project, we should look at the, as you said, the environmental impact. Any project. Now we are having a mega tunnel project which is coming up in Wayanad. I mean, mega tunnel, like your Chardham project. Do we need that? It's coming up very close to Puthumala. Yeah.
So I just also wanted to say that, like in the Himalayas especially, we also have the threat of earthquakes. So the central Himalaya, for example, is sitting in a seismic gap. A seismic gap is when you've not had a major earthquake, which is more than 8 on the Richter scale, for more than 200 years. So Uttarakhand, large part of Uttarakhand, Nepal are sitting in that seismic gap where we're waiting for that earthquake. But now they're using climate change to even differ from the topic of earthquakes. Like they've stopped talking about earthquakes now. Now you've become earthquake resistant, and you're only prone to heavy rainfall, and everything that is happening is just because it's nature's fury and man has done nothing. That is how the Himalaya progressing forward. So I wanted to talk about this thing that the governments do, that they form committees to if anything happens, let's say a disaster happens, a committee will definitely be formed to see that what went wrong. Whose mistake was it? Was it the company's fault that was building a certain project? Was it the administration's fault? And so let's say in Uttarakhand, we've had this 2013 disaster, devastating. We had a committee that was formed by the government, by the Supreme Court, to see the role of hydropower projects in the disaster. The Supreme Court said that since there are so many news reports blaming the hydropower projects for worsening the disaster, see, when floods come, imagine there is no infrastructure on the river, so the floods can pass by with minimum devastation. Now you have concrete and all construction material in the form of a dam blocking the river. Now the water comes, there's water already collected behind the dam, the reservoir of the hydropower project, and then you have the incoming flood. The pressure of this amount of storage, it breaks the dam. The water that goes beneath now downstream has all this construction material also, so it becomes even more threatening to downstream areas, because it's not just water anymore, it is all this construction material also that it's taking with it. So these hydropower projects caused a lot of devastation after 2013. They ravaged the area. So the court formed a committee to see, whether we can drop certain proposed hydropower projects, and a committee was formed, Ravi Chopra committee, to propose that, and it proposed that 23 projects should be dropped. Then again, the government, the administration, the hydropower lobbies, they are not happy with it, obviously. So they formed another committee. But they were not happy with that report also. Then they formed another committee. So they were happy with that report, but then activists then challenged this in the court. So that case is pending for these many years. It's been more than 10 years, right? About this Char Dham project, people went to court. They went to the NGT. It didn't work out. They went to the Supreme Court. They said that the way you are cutting the hills is going to kill us in the rains, because all these hills will come down. You are cutting them vertically, like you're not even seeing, there's no gradient you're cutting them in for widening the road. You're just cutting them horizontally, mindlessly. You will not believe that one of the petitioners who had gone to the court actually died in one of such instances. She actually died in a landslide that happened because the rains got the hill down in a landslide, right? So then the court formed a committee, the Supreme Court, to study the environmental impacts of the Char Dham project when the project was already under construction. They were not happy with the committee's report. Then they formed another committee to just allow for roads as wide as possible in the Himalayan terrain. So have you also seen something like this in the Western Ghats, where you have committee after committee after committee being formed, but nothing,
we have a fallen icon here, the Madhav Gadgil. When every flood, we sort of revive him. Like Gandhiji's poster on the note, we bring Madhav Gadgil and say, see, Madhav Gadgil has said it. I'm very sad. In fact, I know him personally for the last 15 years, right from Maharashtra days. Madhav Gadgil report is a classic case where Gadgil had specifically said that don't have constructions in ecologically sensitive zones. Gadgil report is very simple. I mean, if you in a tool, I can just mention it in 3 lines. It's nothing complicated, and I don't know why people say that Gadgil report is so much complicated. See, you have forest laws for forests. I mean, forests are all protected. All the forests are protected. All the forests in the country are protected. But what is not protected is the buffer zones. Buffer zones are very much needed, because that is where the streams originate, micro streams originate. So Gadgil said, see, it's like a skeleton. A man can't live just as a skeleton. You need flesh, isn't it? So forest is like that. Forest is a dynamic organism. Forest is just a skeleton. What is around is a buffer zone. You have the small grasslands. You have the small trees and woods, and all those streams originate from the buffer zone. So what he said was, and across the world, it's like that. You go to Europe, you go to any country, mountains are protected like that. It's absolutely scientific. He said that ecology sensitive zone 1 in the buffer zone, let's not have any kind of construction. Nothing. Don't have red industries. Ecology sensitive zone 2 and 3, you can have quarrying. He is not against quarrying. Madhav Gadgil is not against quarrying. But that was also made against him, and he's against quarrying, is an anti. You can do farming wherever you want. There is no restriction for farming. But he said, don't have red category industries, which is again bad for the rivers, isn't it? I mean, I would say Western Ghats is our green lung. It's our Amazon forest. Look at what has happened in look at the pollution level in Delhi, the AQ. I mean, look at Kerala, for example. The fact that we have the highest lifespan in India, 71, 72, is just because of Western Ghats. It's just because of this greenery around us, which is getting. Look at Delhi. I mean, see, what is there? I mean, you have SUVs, you have big buildings, you have highways. If there is no quality of life, if there is no pure air, if there is no pure water, I mean, what is the cities meant for? They're all dead. So Madhav Gadgil said, if you need to have townships, you should have a sustainable township. He said, ecological sensitivity zone 1 is where all your water streams originate. Don't do anything there. Zone 2 and zone 3, you can have constructions, and zone 1, don't touch it. Anyway, very interesting fact is that, which again I found out during the Kerala floods, all the landslides which has happened, even the Wayanad landslide, have happened in the ecological sensitive zone 1. I need to talk about landslides a bit, because I don't think floods are that much important, because Western Ghats is all about landslides, which even Himalayas, for example. I've been researching on landslides for the last 4 or 5 years. I've been talking to a lot of experts, in geologists, to understand why landslides are occurring, isn't it? There are many reasons given for landslides to occur. You have the first, I'll give you 3 basic reasons for landslides to occur. One is rains. I mean, obvious reason. 2 is lack of vegetation. If there is no forest. And 3 is the high elevation. If you have a 20-meter elevation, it's susceptible to landslide. And the 4th reason is most important reason, which is like human interference. Every landslide has these 4 factors. Only when the 4 factors come together, landslides occur. Why not? That happened. In Idiki, that happened. So if you look at the history of each landslide, there will be this kind of factors. Unfortunately, we haven't done a landslide study. Yeah, I think I mentioned.
Please finish your point. I was just going to open for Q&A after you had.
I think floods and landslides I've mentioned. I think I can go on and on. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to open for question and answer, but before that, Viju, in your book, you have every chapter starts with some lines of tribal songs from across the Western Ghats. And obviously tribes live with, like, they're one with ecology. So their songs have to do a lot with the environment. If you could just sing at least one of those songs for us before we open for Q&A, please. And just tell us what it means. Thank you.
Hello.
Okay. I'll sing a few lines about my guru, who's Sugata Kumari teacher. I don't know, everyone knows Sugata Kumari teacher here. She's a famous, she's a Nightingale of Kerala. And we miss her a lot. She's a Medhapatkar of Kerala, I would say. She was the sane voice of, she had such a vision, such a green vision. Unfortunately, we are missing her too much. And her voice was taken seriously by the planners. She's written this poem, which is there in our school textbooks also, which I think most of you must have heard. I'll sing a few lines since you have said that. It's about this bird, this wounded bird. She was living in this tree, and the tree was cut by the logger. And the tree was a home, and the tree fell down. And her partner died. And even the community of birds died. And she lost her one wing. Yeah. There is no wing. She lost one of her wings, and she's just lying down, and then yet she's trying to sing. When I listen to that song, I feel we are all wounded birds today. We are all victims of landslide. You go to Wayanad. It's so. I mean, we are all trying to come back to life. I mean, we are all part of this environment, even human beings. I mean, you can't see us separately as nature. So the song is called Oru Paattu Koode. I think I've written it down a bit. I don't want to miss the lines. Sorry. It's called Oru Paattu Pinne, one more song. ഒരു പാട്ടു പിന്നെയും പാടി നോക്കുന്നിതാ, ഒരു പാട്ടു പിന്നെയും പാടി നോക്കുന്നിതാ, ചിറകൊടിഞ്ഞുള്ളൊരു കാട്ടുപക്ഷി, ചിറകൊടിഞ്ഞുള്ളൊരു കാട്ടുപക്ഷി, മഴുതിന്ന മാമരക്കൊമ്പിൽ, മഴുതിന്ന മാമരക്കൊമ്പിൽ തനിച്ചിരുന്നൊടിയാ ചിറകു ചെറുതിളക്കി, തനിച്ചിരുന്നൊടിയാ ചിറകു ചെറുതിളക്കി, നോവുമെന്ന് നോവുമെന്തോ, നോവുമെന്തോ, പാട്ടു കേട്ടങ്ങനെ പാവം പാടിടുന്നു, ഇടറുമീ ഗാനമൊന്നേറ്റു പാടാൻ, ഇടറുമീ ഗാനമൊന്നേറ്റു പാടാൻ, ഇണയില്ല കൂട്ടിനു കിണയില്ല, ഇണയില്ല കൂട്ടിനു കിളികളില്ല. താങ്ക് യു.
Thank you so much, Viju. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Do we have question and answer? So sorry,
Sir.
questions.
Sir, am I audible to you?
Yeah, sure.
So I got two queries to you, very small queries. Because of the ecological disasters happening in the hills, the rivers in the downstream is getting silted up. Most of the rivers in Kerala are silted up in the downstream. So that is one of the reasons they say that for the floods, flash floods. So here again there is a court. There is a we cannot mine the sand also from the river. We cannot desilt the river because of the court, some various court orders. This is a part of judicial activism. As a journalist, what do you think? This is a conflicting things are always happening in our country. And second, many of the environmental permissions are being devolved down to the level of local self-governments for somebody's interest. So most of those local self-governments people are not that competent to study the effect of various environmental problems. So here, what can we do? We have to educate the local self-government, or we have to take the power out of local self-government and invest it with the Department of Environment.
What do you think, sir? The second question, what do you think? What is your answer?
I feel that it should be handled by a competent people, not by the half-educated local self-government. This cannot be done because it is a vital thing, environmental. But that may not be politically correct if I say like that. But that should be there. Competent people should handle such kind of serious issues.
Again, the problem here is again the whole thing of how you see entities as a single entity. I mean, my part of the river, that's what I was trying to say. My part of the river, my panchayat, my village, that is the whole problem. I'll give you a simple example. I'll give you a broader example. I mean, it's very important that you have this broader picture. River Kaveri river, you know, Kaveri dispute, you know. Kaveri gets water, gives water to Bangalore city. Now, Kaveri river's major tributary is Kabani river. Kabani. Where does Kabani originate? In Wayanad. Now, Kabani river, the tributaries of Kabani river is Panamaram river. Now, Panamaram has substreams in the Western Ghat region. and all the substreams have been reclaimed. So Panamaram River during during summer, it gets completely dried up. I mean, Kaveri River, the reason for Kaveri River to get dried up is because there is no water in Kabani River. So that's a problem. If you don't see the entire picture, the broader picture of a river, right from the Western Ghats to where it drains in the Bay of Bengal or probably in Arabian Sea, you should see the river in an entirety. And you should see whether you need to sort of reclaim, you need to sort of, as you said, you need to sort of take sand in a particular region. You should take sand. If you need to you should take sand. And you should give sand holiday. You can't go on like Bharatapura, that's the reason. Now you're going on taking sand. Yeah, so that's what. So once you have a river protection authority in Kerala, which is obsolete. Nobody's there. It's just meant to take mud. So I am saying I always say this. Let's adopt one river. Don't adopt too many rivers. In Kerala, there are 44 rivers. Just adopt one river. Make it as a model. I mean, I'm not saying government doesn't have money. I can understand government doesn't have money. Adopt one river. Don't go for the big rivers and show it as a model. When you show this as a model, people will come together. The communities will come together. You don't have models here. You have experts here. That's what, there is no community initiative because you don't have models here. I mean, there are so many scientific reports, there are so many things, but the problem here, what is missing is you only see at your local level, at your panchayat level. I mean, you can't see like that. You should see the Western Ghats in that entirety, isn't it? Western Ghats is not for just one state. The rivers are not for one state. What was the first question? Judicial activism, I'm not quite sure. I mean, again, you need to do a proper study, a scientific study, whether we need to, like for example, Chalakudi Samrakshana Samati is doing a marvelous job. River Research Center, they're doing a marvelous job. I know Ravi Chetan. I mean, there are people doing but the problem is it's all pockets. These are all done in very pockets. You don't have a system. I mean, again, the problem is political will. Nobody's bothered. That's a problem.